long time no Aether. As a school teacher, the end of the school year is always a super busy time, hence our hiatus, along with, a good chunk of our player base. But this summer is the summer of the elements. And with that, before we get into the patch notes for this, as we go into the second half of our competitive season, a little information for you guys. We're going public here in the next couple of weeks. We'll have a website launch and all kinds of new content to post onto the game, along with the debut of our card game that's going live. And for anyone that has been following this journey so far, this is going to be a huge step, and I'm really excited for what's to come. And so if you have any love for this game or have any love for, what this could be, we're going to need your support. We're going to need your feedback on our social media and our posts and all that, and for you to spread the word to make this as great as it could be. And as I know what it will be. And with all that, let's get into the patch notes, the official patch notes, as we go into the second half of the competitive season of Empires of Aether, the next great turn-based strategy board game. And before this patch, in our competitive matches, and there were a lot of games played outside of the stream side of things, because that's really all we had time for. At the school day, we had kids that were testing some new things, we were putting into the game, some changes. But before all that was going down, take a look at the numbers. Fire at an 80% pick ban rate, air at a 90% pick ban rate, and for good freaking reason. They are very, very powerful. But then you've got water, despite it being nerfed heavily, still had a 70% pick ban rate, and most of those were actually happening after the changes to it. So it's still very, very powerful, or still very, very feared by players. And Glacier and Lightning, very much loved by the player base thus far. And I'm surprised that Lightning is not getting banned more often than it is. Right now it's only at a 30% ban rate, 60% pick rate. But I do think that's going to change moving forward. Arcane, not being looked at whatsoever, but I do think it's going to be more strongly considered moving forward. And we haven't even changed anything about it. But it's what is happening outside of the stream games that has garnered a lot of information for us. Now, Blood was doo-doo, garbage. So we made some changes to it. And so in those changes outside of the stream games, man, Poison. I've been saying it for a long time. Anyone that's communicated with me about this game for a while knows I've been always hyping up Poison. But Poison hasn't been tuned into by too many players. And then finally, it was getting the attention it deserved. And by God, was that a very, not making a pun here, a toxic situation. It just felt miserable to play against. They had abilities that would shatter any element's economy, along with just being a total nuisance. And their multiplying like rats ability is just far too strong. And so Poison getting a nerf that really has been long overdue, but because it wasn't ever really getting noticed by newer players, wasn't really exciting for players to pick for whatever reason, it wasn't getting the recognition, and therefore we couldn't see how broken it was. However, on the outside as well, Arcane getting played by a few players, showing just how versatile it is, and not only at the more expensive turn starts. What I mean by that is 16-16 or 20-20. Very, very versatile in even the 10-10 or 13-13 options. So, Arcane, sneaky, cheeky pick? I don't know. And Aggro Sand getting a couple of wins outside with just one desert in the corner. I'm coining this title the Tuscan Raider build. Very powerful, very good against these aggro nations with those two tier 2 abilities that are really good at stifling militaristic takeovers. And then the other just overall game change was that bosses are just dying too fast. And so to slow the game down just a skosh, bosses, most of their healths are getting changed, upped a little bit. Blood was updated, we put some new abilities on it, and then it was just so insanely broken that it was immediately brought back down. And so my personal view on the tier list before the patch, that's the picture on the left, versus what I think it will be after the changes that we're going to see here, is we had 4 elements that were clearly the most powerful, and not to anyone's surprise, it's all of the most aggro elements: air, lightning, poison, fire. With the changes to the elements that are, being specifically rolled out for us, and the changes that we're seeing are poison and fire. But on top of that, mechanics changes, the boss's health getting upped. I think this is going to definitely slow the game down by 1 to 2 turns, which is going to slow down the success rate of the nations like lightning, air, fire, and poison. But air and lightning aren't actually getting anything changed about their abilities, and so I do think they're still going to be very, very highly sought after. S tier, perhaps. Air is so good, so flexible. You don't even need fields in your corner. Its abilities, its moveset just allows it to adapt to any situation when played correctly. Lightning, you know it's bread and butter. Super powerful tier 1 that scales into tier 2 that allows you to take on threats. But now because those bosses are a little bit higher in health, can they do it as consistently? And so Lightning being in the S tier is actually sort of I'm kind of wobbly on it. I don't know if I really buy it. But Earth and Water are going to be as strong as ever, especially with these more aggro threats taken out. Blood is certainly going to be near the top. It is an economic powerhouse and a great mid-game threat that stifles the very, very soldier-heavy militaristic nations such as air, lightning, and fire. And so Blood is a really, really good pick into those. And now, because of these changes, you've got a few other elements that are moving up the ranks, in my opinion. I don't want Poison to be a universally picked element. I don't think that's what its playstyle is meant to be, but I do think it's going to be very, very powerful. And so because other elements are changing, that is going to make other elements more viable. And whereas I don't really think any element is just a garbage pick in any corner, Moon definitely still needs some work. And Sand is so hard to judge because when it has one desert in the corner, it's fine, it's okay. But when it has two deserts in its corner, it's just getting banned right away because of how powerful it is. So Sand is in a really, really weird spot, but I do think it has viability and more options than just two desert corners. And Arcane, try it out. Try it out. It's freaking good. It's a thorn in people's side. So let's get into the changes that these abilities are going to take form for the second half of the season. First of all, Fire. I wanted to give more elements 10-10 versatility with abilities such as Priority Strike. And what people did was, well, they just were taking it in the 16-16 and 20-20 position to still get an even greater economic leg up on players. And so now, more abilities that are like this are going to have this early turn conditional text. You can't use Priority Strike unless you're in the turn 1 or turn 2 position, 10-10 or 13-13. On top of that, we cut the soldier count in half. It was just a busted ability and made their capability of taking or getting a volcano and mountain by turn 2 very, very, very consistent. So they'd have +3 on their dice roll to take any low health boss in their corner within 3 turns, which was just so powerful. Then we get a Poison, which is getting a lot of changes here. A lot of changes. Poison's Overcultivated is going to one enemy-owned tile, so it doesn't just totally shatter people's economy. And then Man-Made Plague, which I've always said has been just stupid powerful, finally just being used to the fullest with Moon's implementation in the game. It's absolutely torturous to play Moon against Poison. You can't play it. It's just, you can't win the matchup. And so Man-Made Plague, a little more versatility in that whoever is afflicted by it can opt to lose half of their soldiers. They can take the chance of a low roll, or they can just go ahead, take bait, cut bait, and lose half their soldiers. So I do like that. I think it's a very, very balanced flavor for a tier 1 ability. But then, their bread and butter, which controversial for those of us that really, really like Poison, Multiplying Like Rats is getting changed. It is a tier 3 level ability that was positioning itself very cleanly in tier 2, and it is getting nerfed. Multiplying Like Rats can now only train 1 army per turn at that discounted rate of 5 food, still an absolutely massive bonus. And so what I think this is going to do is this is going to slow Poison down by 1 turn. Whether they are charging at their enemy or taking boss tiles, it'll just take you 2 turns to get that crucial 2 armies for 10 food. But on top of that, you're still getting that soldier advantage from your other tier 1 abilities. And so what did we do? We gave the original Multiplying Like Rats ability a tier 3 flavor card. So if you really, really like it, you can't do without it. There it is. Take it in tier 3. Moving on to Blood. Once again, this is the second change made to Blood this month. Blood is getting the nerf to the general whenever it loses in battle is getting removed. So the Blood General is going to stay at the strength that it was prior to any defeat, simply because it couldn't keep up with these faster nations. The game was moving very, very fast, and Blood would simply be 1 to 2 to maybe even 3 turns behind doing its really, really big play. And so it wasn't relevant. Well, now it is. It's very relevant. I can personally attest to that because I've played it a couple of times, and it's very, very powerful to the point where it had to be nerfed incredibly quickly after the changes we put in. And so on top of this passive card change here, you're going to see some abilities getting implemented as well. Their castles have reduced defense. It's now only 20 defense, but they are producing 3 food per turn. So Blood is very, very good in a building material heavy corner, putting castles on every tile that you can, and you're getting passive food there. Their defense had to be cut because their Blood General is going to ramp up a little bit faster. Therefore, we can't have the Blood General out there scourging the rest of the map and you still being able to defend your base without even having a soldier on the battlefield. And so that is the reason for that. Now let's get on to these new abilities. We have Blood's finally long-awaited double movement ability in Tier 1, and this is what just really pushed them to the top. I think it is far overdue that they've had it. Seeing Red is going to be an absolute staple to their Tier 1. And it was combined with Red Shadow, which we'll see the change here in a second, to just devastation on any element. It just really felt unplayable against. And so we're going to see a couple changes to that as well. But we also have a new Tier 1 available with a more aggro Blood approach. If you're going to take Red Shadow, Seeing Red, I Am Inevitable is a really, really good Tier 1 card that I personally use. And you get actually a lot of value at it when you're playing against certain matchups. Matchups where you can exsanguinate on turn 3 or turn 4 to get that bonus. And then they might not have the economy to actually push your general back out of there. But then Blood Drive. If you want to go a super general, powerful, focused strategy, Blood Drive is a Tier 2 passive that allows you to go to Tier 3 without actually spending the resources, which I think is very, very good. This card started out at 20 soldiers, very swiftly had to be rectified and put to 30. So I do think it's a very, very viable option. And then we move into the other changes. Red Shadow has been nerfed. The stat changes are gone, and the general cannot move till turn 4. This still gives him a 1-tile advantage. If you were to move turn by turn to the temple, he would get there at turn 4, and then he couldn't move afterwards. So this does give him a 1-tile head start, essentially, for you to then use that Seeing Red Tier 1 card to just devastate any opponent that has overstepped their bounds in the middle of the board. And then Scarlet Fever is perhaps the most interesting new card to date. It's very interesting. You're in that 10-10 position and you hate your life. Blood is a really, really cheeky pick because you're actually starting out at 23-23 on turn 2. Plenty of resources to put several soldiers out there, buy all the tiles around your capital, and get a free castle there, and probably put resource buildings on all of them as well. Very, very powerful. You're getting delayed a turn, but is it worth it on the other side? Well, I would say it's very, very risky if you're going up against Glacier, who can ice you out, Lightning, who can just zerg you down, or Fire or Air, who can zerg you down. But in other matchups, a little bit slower, definitely very good. And continuing the trend of us adding new strategies to our elements, Metal is getting a chain-themed line of abilities. And now Metal has the record for the most abilities available in the game. And so essentially how it works is your tiles that are in consecutive line with one another can become links in your chain that give you access to more powerful abilities, such as locking your opponents down. And really the entire idea, the premise behind this theme of abilities is that this is going to curtail any soldier-centric strategies. It is the anti-aggro, slightly more aggressive version of Metal, as opposed to farming up for your 4 ore and smelter tiles to get that quest done, metallurgical men in tier 2 to stall any aggression upon you, and just farming up for the late game. This is more of a mid-game pop-up with the potential to even stifle anything in the early game with abilities such as Miranda Rights and moving up the chain. But you really only get 2 tier 1s with this because Chain Gang is the central ability with this. Chain Gang is what allows you to actually turn your tiles into links as well. And so we also have Metal getting their monument. The monuments have been a very, very cool addition to the game. We're still working on how to integrate them more commonly. I've got a few ideas with that we'll be exploring this summer with the finale of our season. But Metal is finally getting their monument, and it is a jail. Soldiers that aren't yours that die elsewhere on the board get locked up, where the enemy can actually pay at a discounted rate to bail them out. But who does that payment go to? It goes to the Metal player himself. But if you leave those soldiers in there and allow the Metal player to go to tier 3, well, then he's breaking them out of jail, and they are all going to be that players. Now, that is a powerful ability. And with this as well, we also have new tier 3 Titan passives and a quest for them. So Metal's got a lot of options, and that makes them super viable. They were already really, really, really strong, but now perhaps even more viable because they have more flexibility. Just trying something out here, the Dragon's Lair. I don't really like this change. This was a request by Goofy. Shout out to Goofy. The Dragon's Lair will now melt Blizzard tiles. Blizzards are very, very frustrating to go against for several matchups. So perhaps this is not a good change because it does make Glacier less viable. However, I did play up against it, and you can manage it. You can play around it. Stable's absolutely getting the nerf it deserves. At 5-5, it was just so broken whenever it was on the board, and these aggressive nations were just jumping on it the moment that they could. 10-10, very reasonable price for it. Now we get into the bosses changing in their health, slowing the game down by a turn or two. Lots of changes. Ladon and Terrace going from 40 to 60. These are the bosses that give you 20 food or 20 building materials, depending on which one you're talking about. And so slowing that down a little bit. Vipress is much more relevant than I actually thought it was going to be, but because the meta is changing to the soldier-centric strategies, Vipress is super relevant. You get up to 3 armies with it, actually a total of 6 armies if you're playing it fully, and so now the health's got to be changed. Monsolis. Monsolis has been lightning or fire or poison's bread and butter to kill turn 2 or turn 3, and now they're going to struggle to do that. You're going to have to take a pretty hefty dice roll if you want to do that, and I think that's a pretty fair change. Lorgaroth is actually going from 70 health to 60 HP, and its ability is going to be a little more modern. We're changing it to now be a sort of resurrection ability that gets you up to 2 armies. Much more usable because, thinking back on it, I don't think it's been used in months. You could kill Lorgaroth for a win condition, sure, but you weren't ever using Sowell, and so Sowell I think is going to be much more viable here. And then the Grey and Corvus, that health had to be changed. My goodness, they were busted. And I think all of you players who have been in competitive contention are going to be very, very approving of those boss health changes. It's going to slow down the game just a skosh. And with Aether going to the temple at turn 7 now, I think it's going to make a lot more strategies very, very, very viable. And so that is the mid-season May patch notes of the first competitive season of Empires of Aether, the next turn-based strategy board game. I love you. See you soon!